One element of math that I've put a lot of my energy into evolving is simplifying algebraic expressions and solving algebraic equations and inequalities. So today, with this video, I'm going to be just focusing on how I work on simplifying algebraic expressions and the way in which my instruction tends to differ from the standard practices. But as usual, I'm going to start by pointing out some of the common issues that I see students face when tackling the task of simplifying algebraic expressions. First of all, and most of all, combining unlike terms. Sometimes, for some students, it takes a lot to get them out of the mindset that unlike terms can be combined. And after all, this is one of their first experiences dealing with the idea of unlike terms and dealing with the idea that you're going to not end up with a single number as your answer. So getting them to be okay with multiple unlike terms that can't be combined as a final resolution of to the simplification process, that can be tough. And even long after, whenever a student doesn't really understand what to do in a situation with an expression or an equation, I often find that a couple of them will default back to thinking that maybe what they're supposed to do is combine unlike terms. Um, so that happens a lot. Improper placement of minus or negative signs on our terms. Terms are only connected by addition so that you can apply the commutative property to them and rearrange them. We need to have that understanding that the minus sign in front of a term is connected to the term and is essentially a negative sign. And students often have a difficult time grasping that concept. Third, when we're dealing with groups of terms and we have to apply the distributive property, plenty of times I see the distributive property not being fully applied. If we've got two terms inside a group, they will just apply the distributive property to only the first term because it's the one that's right next to the coefficient, and then they'll ignore the other term entirely. Even if they do manage to multiply both terms, oftentimes they will fail to distribute the negative sign. This is another, just like combining unlike terms, this is one of the most common issues that students face when facing a situation where they have a group of terms with a negative sign or minus sign in front. They do not know or do not remember to distribute that negative sign to the terms in the group in order to fully simplify that situation. And finally, once they learn how to deal with equations using the addition and subtraction property of equality, I find students will occasionally be misapplying the equation rules to expressions. This will also happen within equations if you have like terms that are on the same side of the equation already. You'll still see students trying to add or subtract to both sides, even though they're on the same side, and end up having difficulties with that as well. So, what do I do about it? Well, through a lot of trial and error, I've come up with 4 big ideas. And they're not necessarily in the order I want them, but this slide deck, I can't really rearrange it, and I don't want to start over. So you're going to get them in the order that I wrote them. Number 1 is a manipulative called term cards, and I'll show you what those are in a minute. I introduce vocabulary that I don't see happen much. The idea of simple and compound terms. And we'll talk about what those are and why it's important to me to refer to them as such. Number 3, I have a small scaffold for distribution using a multiplication frame in order to reinforce the concept of distributing the coefficient to both or all of the terms that are inside the group. And then finally, an emphasis on using the commutative property to sort terms by type. I really go hard into the commutative property when dealing with simplifying expressions and solving equations. And that's mostly to solve the idea of misapplying those equation rules in expressions or on the same side of an equation because students aren't quite getting the grasp of the expression rules versus the equation rules. So, with that being said, let's go through each one at a time. First of all, what are term cards? These are term cards. Right now, they are just blank little scraps of paper, little rectangles. But the idea is that students will write terms on these cards, one term per card. And the terms are implied to be connected by addition. So you have two separate cards, you'll have two terms on them, and it's implied that there's a plus sign in between separate cards so that you can rearrange your cards however you want. It works to reinforce both the commutative property in preparation for combining like terms and not combining unlike terms. And it also does a great job of helping them learn about the stickiness of minus signs, making sure that they are writing the minus signs on the cards and so that they can travel with the terms that follow them. I think I took care of all the notes on this one, so we'll move on to the next one. So, vocabulary, simple versus compound terms. So, a simple term is a term that contains no groups. Most of the terms we deal with are simple terms. But I created the idea of a compound term as a way to describe grouped terms with a shared coefficient or shared denominator. The idea being that these are compound terms because they are sharing the same coefficient, but they are still terms. Therefore, all the rules that apply to terms, such as being able to write them on a term card and being able to rearrange them, are still true for these compound terms. And it's really easy to be talking about them once I have established this vocabulary for them because they see these things as single entities that they are simplifying into multiple simple entities. The multiplication frame. As I said, it looks similar to an area model. So it's something that students should already be pretty familiar with. You might want to hold up a multiplication table in front of them just to refresh them on the idea that they are multiplying the side number by the top number for each cell. But you make as many cells as you need in order to accommodate the number of group terms, which will go on top. And then you just multiply in each cell. And once again, the contents of the cells are terms, and therefore they are implied to be connected to each other and other terms by addition. I will say that multiplication frames are going to make a comeback in my curriculum when I introduce the idea of multiplying or factoring polynomials. So this is a great opportunity in my curriculum to introduce the idea of a multiplication frame now before I end up using it a lot more later on in the algebra curriculum. All right, and finally, an emphasis on the commutative property. We already should know what the commutative property is. It says that when adding or multiplying, order does not matter. And since terms are only connected by addition, technically, that means the order of terms does not matter. That works hand in hand with the term cards. The big key emphasis is that I continue using this property when I move into equations. I actually use the commutative property as an alternative to the addition and subtraction properties of equality, which I will detail in another video, but it creates a continuity that I find to be effective for the students when linking expressions, equations, and inequalities together into one big pot of soup. So let's try a few examples. So if I am dealing with this expression up above, the first thing I'm having students do is I'm having them write them on term cards. So we can imagine each of them is now on a card. And once I have them on a card, then I give them two activities, two rearranging activities to start off with. The first time, I instruct them to rearrange the cards in any way they want. And the reason why I start off with allowing them to do it any way they want is because I want them to focus on the fact that they can do this, not that they must do this. It's a freedom. And I always really emphasize freedom when it comes to algebra for my students, because I think the idea of choice, the idea of chart your own path to success, is a really strong one that resonates, especially with the higher level students who are seeking to, do a little bit more experimenting. And then the second time around, I have them rearrange it in a specific way so that like terms are grouped together. So what you see in the second row is what it will look like if the x terms are all grouped together and the constant terms are all grouped together. And then after that, I have them combine like terms to finish off the simplification process. Now, what if we've got what I call compound terms? So in this case, the first thing I usually have students do is I have them circle or box the compound terms. And that way, they get accustomed to the idea of seeing them as terms that could be put on term cards. I don't usually actually have them write them on term cards, but I get across the idea that the minus sign and the coefficient in front of the group are part of that compound term and therefore need to be included in the circle. From then on, like I said, I tell them to circle the compound terms, and then I ask the students to simplify the compound terms, i.e. use the distributive property to distribute. So here are a couple multiplication frames, which I'll just demonstrate. I would never have them put their multiplication frames underneath the expression. I just don't have any room with the board. I would have them put them off to the side or on a separate piece of paper because I like to hold the area underneath the expression a sacred place for rearranging the expression and conducting my combining like terms. But in any case, 4 times 6x would give me 24x, and then 4 times negative 8 would give me negative 32. Over here, I just have negative or minus, so that just turns 2x into negative 2x, and 9 into negative 9. And now I've got my simple terms, which I can plug back into my expression in the same spots. So once I've done that, here I have all simple terms, and then I can move on, just like last time, into rearranging them and setting myself up for combining like terms.